Hello everyone. I figured I'd jump on here for a bit and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Darcy Marie, and I figured I'd jump on here for a minute. This is my first live video, so I haven't really made any live videos in this group, but I figured I'd jump on and just kind of go over a few things, share a little bit about my journey of this condition, and just kind of take my time with it in regards to kind of explaining and telling you a little bit apart my journey, and just kind of share things with you. In case you haven't noticed, I did change the group name. The reason why I did this is because I recently had a genetic confirmation in a way of a CACNA1A disorder that is likely to be causing my episodic ataxia. So that's why I changed the group name. Otherwise, everything else is the same. And yeah, so I figured I'd jump on here and kind of give you an overview. For those of you that don't know anything about having a mutation within the CACNA1A. CACNA1A is a gene. Those of us that have episodic ataxia, specifically type 2, have a mutation within the gene CACNA1A. So from the beginning, I was very I was late developmentally, which can be seen in people with CACNA1A mutations. So I was late, kind of developmentally. So things like walking, talking, my motor skills were kind of delayed. I was not reaching my milestones on time and whatever. So it started when I was an infant that I was just kind of delayed and not meeting my milestones. And later on, I was eventually, put through school. My parents were told that the mainstream classes would have been too quick for me, the regular classes. So I was put in special needs classrooms, and I'd started with full-time speech and language support and autistic support classrooms. We felt that I was a bit higher functioning than a lot of my other peers. But at the same time, the mainstream classes would have still been pretty quick for me. So, I was tossed around from different classrooms, different schools. I was a transfer student, I lived in one area and then I went to school in a different district and things like that. A minibus would come and pick me up. So, as this was going on, being in special needs classrooms, I didn't really have a chance to make a whole lot of friends, and eventually I would lose them because I would switch schools so much. Anyways, with that being said, I kind of like just, I started getting dizzy by the time I was 9 or 10 years old. But they did not interfere with much of anything. It was like about once a month, you know, I was just getting dizzy. They were infrequent, you know, they weren't happening as often when they started out. So that's when the dizziness began. But by the time I went into middle school and into high school, the dizziness got worse. It became more frequent, it became more severe, and I started throwing up. I was starting getting very ill. It became very disabling. So I think someone's watching. But I'm just going over my story here, starting from beginning to end from my knowledge, and kind of like give you an overview of what has been going on. I've never like been live on here, so just kind of like taking my time as I go through things. But anyways, as the dizziness becoming very debilitating and very frequent, it started interfering with my activities. You know, I started getting really sick. I couldn't do normal things like other people my age were able to do. And that was tough. There were instances I've collapsed in physical education, and I could no longer participate in physical education classes because it would be a triggering factor for me. So I started trembling, I started getting tremors, I started getting abnormal eye movements. I would start seeing double, you know, my eyes would cross, and I would, you know, throw up, get dizzy, and, you know, I had trouble coping with my condition. I became depressed, I became anxious. I was afraid that if I went to school, I would have an episode. So, people started to think it was like anxiety or panic attack at the time because I would, you know, become fearful of participating in an activity and then having an episode, and it would frequently happen, and it looked like a panic attack. I seen a psychiatrist, I seen like specialist after specialist. I saw neurologists, I saw doctor after doctor. I had test done after test. I was tested for seizures a long time ago. I had blood work done. I had so many things done, I can't even recall. I had my heart checked. I had multiple things done. I had brain scans. I had several different brain scans. And everyone kept insisting, you know, nothing was wrong with me. I started to feel like I was like crazy, that I might have been imagining things, or people made me feel like it was all in my head. I've had behavioral and emotional problems that has led me into being hospitalized numerous times, like up to 8 times. And people don't realize all the struggles and the things I've gone through because of things that I would go through in my ataxia. People think, well, it's just episodic ataxia. You have episodes of ataxia. You are very fortunate to have episodes of ataxia. I hear this and I feel like, well, I'm being disregarded or my feelings are invalid. But it's not. It's just because I have episodic ataxia doesn't make my feelings any less important, doesn't make my struggles any lesser than someone, let's say, that has SCA or Friedreich's ataxia. It's just that we cope with our struggles a little bit differently, and our ability to cope with these struggles are different as well. So I was suspected to have many things: disorders, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, autism spectrum disorders, intellectual disability, cognitive disorder, and the list goes on, because no one knew what was really going on with me. And it was tough. So for a while, this is very deep, but I became, I had behavioral issues, I had emotional issues. I became into self-harming due to all the troubles and struggles I was having. So I had a fairly traumatic experience growing up that people don't seem to realize. Oh, it's episodic ataxia, right? But I have other things going on that kind of like plays a factor in it, like my neurodevelopmental differences and developmental concerns. So that also plays a factor in such things, and my ability to cope with things. So so in 2009, I was like 17 years old, okay? I was in high school and I was finally put in some mainstream classes after being in special education classes, but I took part-time assistance being in special education classes at the same time as being in some mainstream classes. So if I had struggles or if I had trouble keeping up intellectually, I would get assistance in some special education classes while I still participated in mainstream education classes. So anyways, in 2009, at 17 years old, I was suspected to have episodic ataxia type 2. But it was only a clinical diagnosis. It was only based on my symptoms, my observations, and what was going on. There was no test that confirmed it at the time. This was in 2009. I was put on a medication called exosolamide to kind of like help control my dizziness episodes and my nausea, to kind of like make it more manageable. I'm still on this medication. While my vertigo and nausea is pretty under control, it doesn't take away all my symptoms, and treatment options for EA2 are very limited. So no one has suggested anything different, but I still frequently stumble. I have balance issues, even though I'm not having dizziness or a vertigo episode. I have, I turn around corners, I lose my balance periodically and stuff like that. As I turn around corners, I tend to run into the side of the wall and things like that. So, and I have a wheelchair in case I absolutely need it, and I use a rollator, which is a walker with a seat, when I walk longer distances because I get easily tired. But that's up to date. I have that wheelchair and a walker. But back in school, you know, I would frequently need a wheelchair. The nurse would have to get me a wheelchair to take me to the bus or whatever. And things like that because I was totally unable to walk. And stuff like that. So, as time went on, I was put on exozolamide and have done great ever since, besides my balance issues. But as of September last year of 2020, I transferred back to the neurologist that's known my family history of hereditary ataxia, and back in Pittsburgh at UPMC, and they were the same people that suspected I had it in 2009, after everyone else being totally unsuccessful and claiming I had ataxia. And I transferred back there, and I had my first appointment September last year. It was very insightful. My neurologist is very knowledgeable, very empathetic, and he saw on my MRI that I do have cerebellar atrophy. And many people disregarded it and said it was all normal, that there was nothing wrong. I have midline cerebellar atrophy. My last MRI was in 2017. That was the one he looked at, and he looked at a few I've had done prior to that. It's been known to be there since 2008, but you know, again, everyone said it was normal, that there was nothing wrong for a number of years. So, before 2008 is unknown as to when I first developed the cerebellar atrophy. Though cerebellar atrophy tends to be degenerative, the nerve cells tend to die within the cerebellum, and it tends to be somewhat of a progressive condition. Mine between 2008 and 2017 showed no significant changes within that period. But I don't know what it is up to date as of 2021 because I haven't had a recent MRI done and I haven't had one looked at. So, yeah. But, anyways. So, with that being said, that's a lot to take in or to go over with my story, but he referred me to a geneticist to get genetic testing for ataxia. And it was my second round of genetic testing. The first time around, I had genetic testing by Athena Diagnosis back in 2005. But the genetic test was very limited. Nowadays, science has more so advanced and whatever the case is. But I was tested for the common types of ataxias caused by repeat expansions, which are mutations. And these are types of ataxias like Friedreich's ataxia, spinocerebellar ataxia type 1, 2, 3, and so on, caused by repeat expansions. So, it was only selected few types of ataxias, the most common types, but this all came back normal. At first, it came back inconclusive for the gene PRKCGG. They found a variant, but it was inconclusive. They didn't know if it was disease-causing or if it was benign. It was a new thing they found, and they weren't sure about it at the time. But PRKCGG is the gene associated with spinocerebellar ataxia type 14. So they weren't sure as if it was a factor that plays into that type of ataxia that I possibly had. So, yeah. But going through my second round of genetic testing, that all came back normal. It was recategorized as a negative result. It didn't come back as anything, so that test was totally irrelevant, up to date. The second round of genetic testing I had done was by GeneDx, and I was genetically tested December 28th of 2020. And it was up to 1,000 different genes that cause ataxia, and they were associated with things like point mutations, which is a type of mutation, unlike the repeat expansions that I was tested for before. This genetic test took a completely different route and tested me for a different category of genetic mutations. So, with that being said, the previous test did not cover any episodic ataxias, while the second round of genetic tests include, finally, episodic ataxias, which is what I should have been tested for to begin with, but I was not. So, anyways, with that, after 2 months, almost 2 months of waiting on the results, my genetic test, and I have it right here, and I will share it with you, but it came back as likely pathogenic for CACNA1A gene mutation. And it's inherited in a dominant manner. So there's a 50% chance of passing it parent to child. And the variant that was found is likely to be consistent with a type of ataxia called episodic ataxia type 2. However, I'm going to explain. The likely pathogenic, it's positive for, the test came back positive, but it's categorized as likely pathogenic rather than being 100% guaranteed pathogenic result. So this means that with my test result, there's a very high chance that this variant is causing my episodic ataxia, but it's not at 100% guaranteed yet. So within a few years, I was recommended to call back my genetics team to see if this likeliness has upgraded to being 100% guaranteed to be pathogenic variant to cause episodic ataxia type 2. So I wanted to explain that further. But anyways, this is my genetic test result. And I wanted to kind of give you a visual. Yeah. That's the proteins, the genes, and the chromosomes. So, these are the types of genetic changes. The B9 is likely to not cause a disease. The variant's of uncertain significance, well, it's uncertain as if it's causing a disease or not. And the pathogenic is disease-causing. And likely pathogenic, of course, would be, you know, what mine came back as a high chance, but not absolutely pathogenic. So, yeah. So my test result was positive, and it's a CACNA1A related disorder, dominant fashion of inheritance, and it's labeled as likely pathogenic. It says this individual is has a likely pathogenic variant in the CACNA1A gene, which is likely consistent with the diagnosis of CACNA1A disorder. And it says that this variant has been reported in multiple patients with episodic ataxia in the literature. So I'm technically not the only one with this variant, even though it's labeled as likely pathogenic right now. So I explained what likely pathogenic means. It also says on here. These are the CACNA1A gene associations that come with this gene. You know, whatever your mutation is, you either would have one that causes episodic ataxia type 2, which is me, or familial hemiplegic migraine, or spinal cerebellar ataxia type 6, which is a adult onset spinocerebellar ataxia that is progressive of incoordination and balance. But this is caused by repeat expansions, which is the expansions type of diseases I was tested for before. And SCA6 was one of the genes, one of the disorders I was tested for back in 2005, and it came back normal. So yeah. So this gene, depending on your mutation, can cause global developmental delay, cognitive impairment, intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorder, hypotonia, migraine, hemiplegic migraine, things like that, and cerebellar atrophy, which tends to be progressive or can be congenital, early onset, or late onset. It can cause ataxia, congenital ataxia, tremors, episodic ataxia type 2, and spinocerebellar ataxia type 6. It can cause epilepsy as well, and eye movement disorders like nystagmus, and things like that. This is about the symptoms of episodic ataxia type 2. It's the most common form of episodic ataxia that is hereditary. Onset is usually in childhood or adolescence, but it's variable. Present with, and I wanted to go over this because this sounds a bit confusing, and I've done a lot of research in regards to episodic ataxia type 2. Present with means present with in the now. So even though a person has episodes of neurological symptoms like ataxia, people can have consistent symptoms in between having these episodes, and it can include cerebellar symptoms such as ataxia or nystagmus. So in the now, even though the person is not having an episode, they can develop chronic ataxia in between their episodes, and is usually associated with nystagmus, and this can be due to cerebellar atrophy. So, in addition, they have recurrent episodes of poor coordination and balance, ataxia. Episodes last hours to days. During an episode, an individual may experience seizures, muscle weakness, paralysis on one side of the body, nausea, migraine, and dizziness. Other reported but less common features in episodic ataxia are seizures, developmental delays, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorder. Okay. And I think that covers the majority of it. It explains the inheritance. Like I said, a 50% chance with each pregnancy of passing on the variant to the child. So there's like a 50-50, especially if you do have symptoms. However, this condition can also have incomplete penetrance, meaning an individual who carries the genetic chance may not even develop the symptoms. So even though the person has no symptoms of the condition, they can still have a 50-50 chance. Yeah. And here are some great resources for information. CACNA1A.org, and things like that. So, and let's see here. This is my genetic variant. I don't know if you can see it, but that's it. It's C, lowercase c, dot, 835, capital C, a little, one of those things, and T, lowercase p, dot, capital R, 279, capital C. And that's my variant. It was found within the gene CACNA1A, likely to cause episodic ataxia type 2. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed that source of information, and I'm gonna wrap it up now. So, if you like, please share away, even share this group. I would like to get more people to join if possible, and raise awareness. I'll see you next time. Bye now.